Ground beef prices in the U.S. have surged 63% since 2020. The price of steak during that time has increased more than 60%.
On the CBS Money Watch, red meat prices are at record highs. But President Trump's push to import beef from Argentina to lower cost is a growing beef in the heartland.
Beef prices have soared to all-time highs, with many families feeling the squeeze. Economics correspondent Paul Solman looks at the factors driving prices higher.
A global market does not always react to press conferences or political speeches. Sometimes, the clearest signal comes from silence, hesitation, and the sudden pause of buyers who once moved without doubt. Over the past few weeks, that pause has been impossible to ignore. It began quietly, but the reaction that followed spread far beyond borders, trade offices, and supply chains. What surprised analysts most was not just a decision made in Canada, but how people around the world responded to it. Across comment sections, industry forums, and trade discussions, one theme kept appearing again and again. Confidence in the American beef supply was no longer automatic. Viewers, buyers, and producers alike began asking the same question in different ways. If the system is as strong as we were told, why does it suddenly feel so fragile? The spark for this shift came when Ontario officials refused a massive volume of American beef shipments. Over 150,000 tons were turned away, not delayed, not inspected, but rejected outright. The decision itself was serious, but the reaction to it was even more revealing. In comment sections under news coverage, viewers described the move as overdue. Others called it a warning shot. Some went further, saying it exposed problems that had been building for years. What stood out was how often people focused not on politics, but on reliability. Many comments asked why a market leader like the United States appeared unable to absorb a single major disruption. Others pointed out that when trust breaks in food supply chains, it does not return easily. These were not emotional reactions. They were practical concerns, and global buyers were watching closely. Inside the United States, the industry was already under strain. Long before Ontario's decision, American ranchers had been dealing with rising feed prices, labor shortages, transport delays, and shrinking margins. Several producers reduced herd sizes simply to stay afloat. Others postponed investment plans, waiting for stability that never fully arrived. The system was still operating, but only just. That vulnerability became clearer when one of the largest names in American meat processing made a move that sent shockwaves through the sector. Tyson Foods announced the closure of its major facility in Lexington, Nebraska. For many observers, this was not just a plant shutdown. It was a signal. That facility had been a core artery in the American beef network, connecting ranchers, processors, exporters, and international buyers. At the same time, Tyson's plant in Amarillo, Texas, reduced operations to a single full-capacity shift. Commentators quickly connected the dots. Fewer processing hours meant slower throughput. Slower throughput meant backlogs. Backlogs meant delayed exports. And delayed exports in a global market that values consistency raised red flags. Viewers commenting on these developments did not focus on blame as much as consequence. Many asked whether American agriculture had become too dependent on scale instead of resilience. Others questioned whether years of cost-cutting and consolidation had left the system less flexible when pressure arrived. These conversations were happening not only among farmers, but among international buyers who had once treated American beef as a default option. Ontario's decision landed directly on top of this fragile moment. Canadian officials framed the rejection as part of a broader response to what they viewed as unfair trade behavior from Washington. But the method mattered more than the message. Instead of speeches or tariffs, Canada applied pressure where it would be felt immediately. Food markets respond faster than politics, and the impact was swift. Almost immediately, foreign buyers began reassessing their positions. Japan quietly adjusted its import schedules, reducing future orders without public confrontation. Germany began reviewing long-standing contracts that had once been renewed automatically. Distributors across Europe hinted that contingency plans were being activated. In the Middle East, particularly in the UAE, importers explored alternative suppliers with surprising speed. The comments under international coverage reflected a shared realization. Buyers were no longer asking which country produced the most beef. They were asking which country could deliver without disruption. Several viewers noted that recent years had been filled with policy swings, tariff disputes, labor shortages, and logistical breakdowns coming from the United States. Each issue alone was manageable. Together, they formed a pattern. As export terminals in the U.S. slowed, the pressure moved inland. Cold storage facilities filled faster than expected. Containers waited longer at ports. Ranchers who had already been operating on thin margins now faced falling prices at home because supply could not move abroad fast enough. In comment sections, producers described a sense of being trapped. Animals still needed feed. Costs kept rising. Buyers were no longer guaranteed. While attention focused south of the border, Canada found itself in an unfamiliar position. Inquiries began arriving from markets that had rarely considered Canadian beef as a primary source. These were not short-term spot deals. Buyers asked about multi-year contracts, quality guarantees, and pricing stability. The tone of the conversation had changed. Canada's advantage was not sudden expansion, it was preparation. For years, Canadian producers had invested in traceability systems, quality audits, and consistent safety standards. These efforts were rarely headline news, but they mattered deeply to importers operating under strict regulations. When uncertainty spread, those quiet investments became visible. Diplomacy played a role as well. Canadian trade relationships emphasized predictability. Officials avoided abrupt policy shifts and maintained clear frameworks for foreign partners. In comments, viewers frequently contrasted this approach with the volatility they associated with U.S. trade decisions. The comparison was not about patriotism, it was about risk management. As contracts shifted, the effects rippled outward. Restaurants adjusted menus to reflect new sourcing. Food processors secured long-term agreements that favored Canadian suppliers. Retail chains revised planning cycles to account for more stable deliveries. In markets that had experienced repeated delays from U.S. shipments, the change was welcomed. Economists following the situation warned that this type of shift is rarely temporary. In food markets, trust is built slowly and lost quickly. Once buyers invest in new supply chains, reversing those decisions requires a compelling reason. Several analysts noted that even if American production rebounds, rebuilding confidence will take time. Public reactions reflected this uncertainty. Some commenters believed the U.S. would recover once political tensions eased. Others argued that the damage went deeper, pointing to years of accumulated disruptions that could not be undone overnight. What united these views was acknowledgement that something fundamental had changed. Canada did not seize this moment through confrontation. It benefited from consistency while others struggled with instability. That distinction mattered. Reliability, as many viewers pointed out, is a form of power in global markets. It reassures buyers, stabilizes prices, and reduces risk across entire industries. As months passed, the shift became harder to dismiss. More contracts moved north. More buyers diversified away from single-source dependence. The global beef market did not collapse, but it reorganized. And that reorganization placed Canada in a stronger position than it had held before. The United States now faces a difficult challenge. Capacity alone is no longer enough. Scale must be matched with predictability. Without it, even dominant players can lose ground. Whether this transition becomes permanent remains an open question, but the warning signs are clear. What began as a decision in Ontario became a signal to the world. It revealed vulnerabilities, reshaped expectations, and reminded markets that trust matters more than tradition. As global buyers continue adjusting their strategies, the balance of North American agriculture may look very different in the years ahead. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think this shift is temporary, or has the global market already moved on? If this video reaches 500 comments, we'll pin the best, most insightful comment at the top. And if you want more clear, fact-based breakdowns like this, subscribe to Maple States, turn on notifications, and stay informed.